So this is our third week of work on the removal of overpaint in the upper arches of the church, and it's going very well. We are getting better results at this point than they were able to do back in 2017. We're getting a much cleaner surface and not as much paint left in, and hopefully a more accurate kind of sort of representation of what was there originally, which we can then work from to do the restoration. The festoons are in really great condition. They're painted on wood, and for some reason that paint is really quite robust and has really survived really well. So a festoon is like a fancy garland kind of cornucopia of like either leaves or sometimes it's fruit, usually hanging on a wall, and it's done in a way that looks, pretty representational. Cherubs are on a plaster wall, probably plaster lath. And the festoons are actually on a wood plank that's set into that molding, which is interesting. You would think they would have all been plaster or something, but that makes you wonder if some of those things, the festoons, might have been painted off-site. That's a possibility, that they were actually painted in a studio and then brought in and installed. That's speculation. I can't prove it one way or the other, but it certainly would have given them that option to do it that way. So when we're removing the paint, so we've put on this solvent gel onto the surface. It's similar to paint stripper, but somewhat different. And basically it's allowed to be on there for many hours, sometimes depending on what we're doing. And we're actually taking paint scrapers, sometimes metal, but we're finding just a plastic one is really good. And basically the overpaint softens up quite a bit, so you can apply quite a bit of pressure before you're getting to the original paint, which is tougher and a harder material. So you can gauge the amount of pressure you need to put on, and you don't try to go right down necessarily to the surface of the paint. You try to get most of it off, and then once you've done that, you go back in and remove it with cotton swabs that we roll ourselves with solvents. And so that last cleaning of the remaining material is done with a cotton swab, very gently rolling it over the surface to pick up the remnants of overpaint that are still on the surface. So of all the overpaint layers, the first overpaint layer that was applied in 1912, which represents the first overall whitewashing of the church, is just really tenacious. I'm not sure what it is that makes it different from the subsequent layers, probably because it's the oldest one, and then the ones that were put on after were probably in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. We don't have dates exactly. So the younger they are, the easier they are to dissolve. The older they get, the more tough, we call it polymerization. The oil actually gets really hard. So much more difficult to try to dissolve it. The cherubs seem to be in condition. The surrounding ochre molding that frames them, that paint's a little more susceptible, I think, just to the conditions of the church over time, because it shows quite a bit of damage there, loss, flaking that would have occurred. And the more I see now, the more I realize that probably one of the big reasons they did whitewash the whole church is probably because those decorations showed a lot of damage, and they probably didn't, again, have the wherewithal to start saying, well, we're just going to just like restore this and bring it back to what it was. So the easiest solution was just to probably scrape everything down and just paint. One of the colorful kind of discoveries that we've made is actually the background, the surround around the wings of the cherubs, angels, is actually a green color, which is kind of a teal green color, dark, but very different from the kind of earth colors that make up the rest of the murals. So the cherub were about, I would say, 85–90%. And I've actually started another section on the one adjacent to it in the head. So hopefully tomorrow and into next week we'll have that starting to open up. And we're just keeping our fingers crossed that it's in really good condition and we can use it as one of the examples of a revealed cherub.